First Book of Moses, Bereshith, Chapter 1, First Creation by Elohim. In the former time periods, as a powerful sign of working, chief son and heir Elohim filled with choice things, behold, as a sign Shemayim, the place of the names, and behold, as a sign Aratz, the chief place of running. But observe how Aratz was unorganized and empty, and Shishak rose up from the deep waters, went up to its face, but the Ruach Elohim, as a wall of protection, moved violently upon the surface of the waters. Elohim then declared, light he will exist, and light he will exist. And Elohim gazed upon that beautiful light, and Elohim made distinctive the light from the darkness. And to the light Elohim called out the name Ya'un, and to the darkness he called out the name Leah Laha. This was the close and the dawn of the first age.
The Ketub Abarayas, or the Paleo Hebrew, is a language over 5,000 years old. It chronicles a story branching forth from ancient time. His story, Yahweh. Walk into his story. Read the Paleo Hebrew scriptures.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley. This is the Unexpected Cosmology. And if you came here for a Torah portion, you are in the right place. Do not turn away right now. You're probably like, what in the world am I looking at? Yeah, I did not go to Blockbuster tonight. Why is Greece in front of me? I wanted to give you guys a little preview of what I'm working on right now. And, when so I've kind of given you guys a preview of the 6 million number. I kind of scrolled through that for you guys. I still plan to make that into a video, except I can't, air that on YouTube. So it's going to have to go somewhere else. Still kind of thinking through that, but I don't really have a backup plan, I don't have like a long-term plan for that. But, whenever I write a new paper, I kind of think in my head, like how long it's going to take. I kid you not. I was thinking, okay, Greece, no problem. Oh, it's 4 days tops, 3 or 4 days. I'm going to get this thing hammered out. Be like a 7, maybe a 10-page paper or something like that. And I've been stuck on this now. Stuck isn't the right word. I've been on this now for at least 2 weeks. I've got another week of work in front of me at least. And I was telling my wife yesterday, we were driving, and I'm just like, I gave this big sigh as I'm driving. And I'm over it. I'm just totally over this right now. I've been stuck in Greece, like the songs, everything for 2 weeks. Let me just tell you this. I believe this is going to be worth it. And I can't wait to give this presentation on it. I'll just kind of scroll through what you can see, kind of some of what I have right now. When you guys, there's been a lot of different film analysis done on esoteric films. People have been asking me, like, Noel, like Greece, that's not an esoteric film. Sorry, wrong, it is. And when I do the scene for scene breakdown, by the way, like this is the opening right here, and this is page 7. So it took me up to 7 pages to actually get to the first scene, and I go scene for scene. When you guys see it for yourself, it's going to open up a lot of other kind of esoteric films for you, TV shows, whatever. You're going to start seeing stuff that I think that you've never thought about before. So I'm looking forward to premiering this. As you can see, I kind of just go frame by frame here in a lot of ways, taking everyone through it. You guys can just take a breather, a drink of coffee as I scroll through this. I'm not sure how I'm going to present this. I don't know if I'm going to read it line from, remember when I used to do those papers? I used to like, write these papers every week and just read it for you guys. I don't know if I'm going to do that or just kind of talk my way through it. We'll just end it there. It keeps going. It keeps going. You can see there's 45 pages right now. I don't know how long this beast is going to be by the time I'm done. All right, well, let's talk about something else. I'm taking you over to my store right now, and I want to show you. It's been like 3 or 4 weeks, and I keep forgetting every single week that we go live to go through this and show you. Well, we have this right here, "Good News in the Night" by Crystal Morris. If you want to pick up a really great book to give to your friends, she designed this basically to go through the zodiac, but in a very simplistic way that is intended for, people who aren't really interested in looking at an encyclopedia, right? When you drop like a 400 or 500 page book into someone's lap, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to read this. That's the problem with my books, right? I do that too often. This is like under 100 pages. I think it comes in at 90, just really nice, clean, crisp read that introduces people to the gospel and the stars. But if I put in here, let's just go forward. My mouse isn't working for me now that I'm live. All right. T-shirts. Now, it's been years that I've started the store, and, I didn't really want be one of those guys. I'm just going to sell trinkets with like tuck on everything. And so it took a long time, but I'm really pleased that I found 2 separate designers at the same time who are in the community, who are just up to par with, the things we're teaching here and so on and so forth, and putting out some very beautiful original designs. I love these here, like praise him with drums, praise him with strings. You got the guitar, the harp variation. You got a shirt for all the wool and linen lovers out there. And of course, this one is really awesome here. He Walked the Americas. So come check him out in the Tuck store. And just want to, before we get into it, drop this as well your way. I thank everybody for your support. We are getting Pamela and Rebecca off to a really great kind of new start here with getting them funded for the Paleo Hebrew Scriptures. I remind you, this is like a 10-year project or something whereabouts. Don't know exactly how long this is going to take, but I'm going to be going alongside them the entire way, and I still need you guys' support. I'm doing all of this. I'm not getting funded through this project. This is an answer to prayer that we got, week after week. I came up here and talked to you about the widows here, Pamela and Rebecca, and I'm so pleased y'all has answered those prayers. And for those of you who have been praying as yourself and helping to support them, this is amazing news. Oh yeah, and I forgot the biggest news of all. The most amazing news is that this last week, in my mailbox, I got dropped the Torah. It is completed, all 5 books. And I know what some of you are thinking, Noel, I thought you completed those 2 years ago. Well, we did, but you guys were a part of the process of us translating it live in real time. As it was a miracle that Pamela got those out. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy in time for the Torah portions. That was just like y'all working. I mean, that was a Holy Spirit thing. We got that out, but we wanted to go back in and give it a clean sweep, 2nd edition. And let's scroll through this for you guys here. This is what I'm going to be reading from this document every single week. Let's get through the introduction here. So you could see how beautiful this is. And I have to say that Rebecca, this is her best work she's ever turned in. I've been watching her since we started the store. We started the books together. She needed work, and I'm like, hey, why don't you be an editor or something like that? Edit books for me in format. And she had never, as far as I know, never done that before. And I watched her learn this in real time, and this is just incredible work. So praise Yah for this. And I hope that the completed Torah blesses many people in the decades and even the centuries to come. So thank you everyone for being a part of that process. Okay. So I'm going to have to figure out, I'm going to have to scroll here and find out where we're reading tonight. We're starting in Leviticus chapter 20. So, oh, I'm still in Genesis. You guys can all just appreciate the sound of silence as I slowly scroll there. Still in Exodus, almost there. I should have taken a note of what page it was on. I could have just implemented that, but I'm almost there. All right. 11, 12, 13, 14. It's kind of like unrolling a scroll, isn't it? It's kind of fun. If I were in a synagogue right now. All right, so we'll be reading from tonight, chapter 20. Let's start with the Lord's Prayer, Yahuwah's Prayer. Let's open up tonight. Our Father, set apart is your name, and your royal dominion, your pleasure, your delight. You will exist in Shamayam and in Aratz. And give us our bread continually and pardon our faults, our sins and missteps, in the same manner in which we forgive those who commit faults, sins, missteps against us. And all, do not bring us into the hands of testing, but guard us from all evil. Amen. Oh, I guess we're starting on 21, aren't we? All right, well, let me see here. Yeah, that's right. We finished on chapter 20 last week. All right, we're going to go through chapters 21 through 24 with me, so follow along. And of course, I'm going to try to get through the whole Torah portion, and then we'll have commentary afterwards. Hope everyone is doing well. I hope you guys are enjoying your time here and ready for your Sabbath rest. I sure am. I'll tell you guys, this has been quite the week, and I am, I know Pamela and Rebecca are as well. We are ready for our rest. Commandments concerning mourning customs. Oh, I'm going to say this too before I start this. Somebody, last Sabbath, so I did my Torah portions last Friday night, and we did like chapters, was it 19 and 20-ish? We did just a couple chapters. And I talked to you about this, the idea that the commands that were being put forward were the theory I had, which I still stand by. The theory I had was that it's really, they were geared towards specific religious perverse practices that when the Israelites went into Canaan, they were going to see these horrific things. This is one of the reasons why I talked about the shining at the end of it. I was talking about bestiality, and which was, of course, one of the commands in there. You know, I pointed out, like, why, for most people, like you tell them don't commit bestiality, they're like, got it. Like, you only need to tell me once, and I'm good to go. And it's one of those things, like, why does it keep coming up? And it's because they were going into Canaan, into a very, very dark, sick area of the world where this was being done, I believe, for magical purposes, for the manifestation of spirits, the gods, and things like that. Like, it wasn't just a, you know, getting along with the cow type of thing. But we were discussing the Torah portions with my group on Sabbath the next day and kind of going over some of them again. And I had this just deeper realization of what the Torah is. We call it gnosis. I bring that up, a lot. Like, I could tell you, I could describe it to you, and I will later tonight, and you'd be like, yeah, I get that. We all get that and all. Some of you might even more so than me, right? But that's the thing, right? You can give a definition, but it means kind of different, varying layers for everyone. And it really comes down to how incredibly amazing Yahshua taught the Torah. Like, he is the greatest Torah teacher of all time. And he was spiritualizing it in such a way that you could apply it. You'd be like, how does this apply? Because I'm not going into a sick, disgusting Canaanite culture. Like, I'm not going into that. So how does any of this, apply to me? So I'll be talking about that later tonight. Chapter 21. And Yahuwah, the ever-living, declare toward Al-Mashaha, speak toward the sons of Aaron and declare unto them, for the Nephash, he shall not become polluted among the people. if conditionally for a blood relation near unto him, for his mother and for his father and for his son and for his daughter and for his brother and for his sister, the Bathu Ulaha. Now this is the uh, the form of a kind of a Bethula, which is, it's not like a virgin, right? It's a little bit different than how we think virginity in Western civilization, but a woman who is set apart sexually. The Bathu Ulaha, that is near unto him, which exists without husband, for her he may become unclean. He shall not defile himself as a Baal among his people to profane himself. So I should point out here that we have shifted from last week to this week, where last week it was more like, okay, we're speaking to the commonality of the people. We went from speaking to the Levites to Israel, and now we're back to the Levites again. They shall not make smooth, becoming bald on their head. So this command was already given last week. And why is it being told again? Well, he's clarifying, okay, I said this to the people. They had better not do this. And to you Levites, you had better not do this as well. Just so you know, just so we're clear. The corners of their bearded chin they shall not shave off, and they shall not cut incisions in their flesh. He will exist kudashayam, which is a set apart one, unto their Allahaya, and he shall not profane the name of their Allahaya. For the fire offerings of Yahuwah and the bread of their Allahaya they do bring near, therefore they shall exist kudash. A woman who is a prostitute or defiled, he shall not take for himself. And a woman carried off or driven out from her man, he shall not take. For he is kudash unto Allahaya. And you shall set him apart, for he brings near the bread of your Allahaya. Kudash, he shall exist unto you. For I, Yahuwah, am kudash, which sets you apart. And the daughter of a man who is a priest, if she defiles herself through fornication, she has defiled her father. She shall be burned with fire. We'll see an example of that tonight. And the great priest among his brothers, upon whose head was poured the anointing oil, and whose hand was filled to be clothed with garments, his head he shall not unbind, and he shall not rend his garments. And toward any dead nephash he shall not come, even for his father or for his mother, he shall not defile himself. And of course, this is speaking of a Levite priest, on, that he is not to even bury his own family to defile himself here. I was reading some Talmudic commentary this week, and they were discussing, does this also mean his own wife, his woman? Is he not allowed to, if she dies, is he not allowed to, be with her body and bury her? And out of the makudash of his Allahaya he shall not go forth, for the Nazar oil of his Allahaya is upon him. I am Yahuwah. And he shall take a woman in her Bathu Ulaha, there's that word again, a widow or one driven out or defiled by fornication, these he shall not take, but conditionally a Bathu Ulaha from his own people he shall take as woman. So in this case here, it seems to be insinuating that this Bethula is a young maiden, that she is so young that it is implied that she could not possibly be a widow or, taking part in fornication. That by young, I mean, she is now of marrying age, but, she's like just crossed that threshold type of thing. She's not, so old that she has partaken in this kind of stuff. And he shall not profane his seed among his people, for I, Yahuwah, the ever-living, do consecrate him. And Yahuwah, the ever-living, set words in order toward Al-Mashahad to declare, set words in order toward Al-Aaron to declare, a man from your seed throughout the circuit of the generations which exist with the spot or a blemish upon him shall not approach to bring near lechem. And the lechem here is bread. It reminds me of in Lord of the Rings, the lambas bread, but to bring near lechem of his Allahaya. For any man who has in him a spot or a blemish, he shall not draw near, or perhaps a blind man, or perhaps a lame, or perhaps one who has a depressed nose, or perhaps an extension. Um, and Pamela says here that the extension is a man who has a member too long, usually the ear. Or perhaps a man who has exiting in him a broken or fractured foot, or perhaps a broken or fractured hand, or perhaps a humpback, or perhaps a one who is emaciated or defective in his eyes, or perhaps having a scab or marred testicles. Any man from the seed of Aaron, the priest, shall not approach to bring near the fire offerings of Yahweh the ever-living, who has in him a blemish. He shall not approach to bring near the lachem unto his alahiah. He shall eat lachem of alahiah from the most set apart, and a portion from the kudashayam. Certainly toward the veil he shall not go in, and toward the altar he shall not approach, for he has in him a blemish, and he shall not profane my makudash, for I, Yahweh the ever-living, do consecrate them. And Mishah set words in order toward Aaron and toward his sons and toward all the sons of Yasharel. Now, Yahweh has his reasons for doing this. I'm not going to question him on this, though I would like to understand it better. And we looked at this with the idea of a eunuch. Was it last week? And I showed you the passages where, a eunuch is also not to approach Yahweh in this way or go into the tabernacle. And yet we see Daniel, and most likely the guy was a eunuch. So, people have asked the question, well, is Daniel outside of salvation yet? The answer is no, he is not outside. And in fact, I showed you passages of scripture where it says that the eunuchs who honor him and his commands will be especially esteemed, and that their names, I think if I recall, their names will not be forgotten. We all remember who Daniel is. So as much as it would, stink for these priests, these Levite priests, to have these, maybe it's just a broken hand. It's like they did something. Oh man, now I can't go offer the sacrifices or whatever anymore. I can't bring the fire to the presence of Yahweh anymore. But he's going to still honor these individuals, even if they feel like they have a job now that is less honorable. He's still going to honor eternally those who are obedient to him and love him and serve him. Domestic commandments for priests. And Yahweh the ever-living set words in order toward Al-Mashahah to declare, set words in order toward Al-Aaron and toward his sons, that he Nizar, there's that word again, let me just read this for you, to separate or consecrate himself. For the set apart things of the sons of Yasharel, and that he does not pollute my Kudash name, which they consecrate unto me. I am Yahweh, the ever-living. Speak towards them unto the circuit of your generations, any man from all your seed that approaches toward the set apart ones, which the sons of Yasharel has consecrated unto Yahweh, the ever-living, and he has uncleanness upon him, that nephash shall be cut off from my face. I am Yahweh. Any man from the seed of Aaron, and he is a leper, or perhaps he has a flowing discharge, he shall not eat in the set apart things until the time that he is clean. And any who touch upon any unclean nephash, or perhaps a man whose seed of pouring out goes forth out from him, or perhaps a man who touches upon any swarmer, which is unclean to him, or perhaps upon Adam, he will be unclean to him of all his uncleanness. The nephash that touches upon him shall be unclean, polluted until a rob, and he shall not eat of the Kudash ones unless, conditionally, he shall wash his flesh in water. And the shamash has gone down, then he shall be clean, and afterwards he shall eat from a portion for the set apart ones, for it is his lachem. A carcass, or that which is torn in pieces, he shall not eat to make himself unclean in it. I am Yahweh, the ever-living. And he has guarded my observances, and he shall not carry sin upon him and die in them, for it would profane him. I, Yahweh, do consecrate them. And any stranger who has turned aside from the way shall not eat of the Kudash. And an immigrant, of the priest or a hireling shall not eat of the kudash. But if the priest acquires a nephash with his silver, he shall eat of him, and those born in his house shall eat of his lakum. And the priest's daughter, if she exists as a woman into a stranger, she shall not eat of the kudash things. But the priest's daughter, if she exists as a desolate widow or is driven out, and there is not offspring for her, and she has turned back toward her father's house, like in her youth. But all strangers who have turned aside from the way shall not eat of his lakum. And if a man eats of the kudash in error, then he shall add unto him the fifth part, and shall give it unto the priest with the kudash. And the sons of Yasharel shall not pollute my kudash, that which he will lift up unto Yahweh, and shall not lift upon them the penalty of sin in eating from their set apart things, for I am Yahweh, the ever living, from consecrating them. And Yahweh the ever-living set words in order toward Al-Mashahah to declare. Set words in order toward Al-Aaron and toward his sons and toward all the sons of Yasharel, and declare unto them, any man of the house of Yasharel, or any from among the strangers in Yasharel that brings near his gift for all his avowed sacrifice, and for all his spontaneous willing offerings which they bring near unto Yahweh the ever-living, for an ascending offering. For you to be graciously accepted, it shall be perfect, whole, sound, a male from the herd, from the sheep, or from the she-goats. Anything which has a blemish, spot, or defect you shall not bring near, for it shall not exist favorably accepted for you. And when a man shall bring near a sacrifice of shalom unto Yahweh to consecrate his avowed thing in cattle, or perhaps in sheep, he shall exist perfect, complete, whole, to be graciously accepted. He shall not exist having stain or blemish in him, a blind, or perhaps a broken in pieces, or perhaps a wounded, or perhaps one with a running sore, perhaps one having a scab. You shall not bring near these into Yahweh the ever-living, and shall not give of them as a fire offering upon the altar of Yahweh. And a bullock and a lamb that has anything extended or contracted, you may bring near as a willing offering. But for an avowed sacrifice, he shall not be graciously accepted. And then bruised and beaten, the crushed and the cut or perishing, you shall not bring near unto Yahweh the ever-living, and neither shall you fashion him in your land. And from the hand of a stranger's son you shall not bring near the lakum bread of your Alahiah, for their disfigurement is on them. And from those with the defect in them shall not be graciously accepted. And of course, we're going to turn now to the humane treatment of animals, which I'll be putting a heavy focus on later tonight. And Yahweh the ever-living set words in order toward Al-Mashahah to declare, an ox, or perhaps a lamb, or perhaps a goat, if he is brought forth, then it shall exist 7 days beneath its mother. And from the 8th and further, he shall be graciously accepted for a gift offering by fire unto Yahweh the ever-living. But an ox, or perhaps a lamb, he and his offspring you shall not slaughter in 1 day. And when you slaughter a sacrifice of thanksgiving unto Yahweh the ever-living, of your own good will shall you sacrifice him. On that day he may be eaten. None shall remain from any portion of him until daybreak. I am Yahweh the ever-living. Kind of makes you wonder about, again, I'll be talking about this later, but since I'm thinking about this right now, kind of makes you wonder about eating, lamb, right? And, I guess baby calf or whatever. And the idea that these are ripped away from their mother almost when they come out of the womb. I mean, some of these are pretty fresh is my understanding. I'm not a butcher. I'm not a farmer. I'm not there to do it. But my understanding is that they're pretty young. And according to this, you need to, these sacrifices, he's asking for the baby to be 7 days beneath its mother. And from the 8th and further. So from the 8th day onwards, the baby can be accepted. And why is that? Well, I'll give a little bit of my thoughts afterwards. And I will remind you that, I'm going to start saying this week after week after week, that right now, actually not right now, but in a few seconds from now, I'm going to be in the seat of Moses, meaning that I'm reading the words that Moses wrote down. And Yahshua reminds us that when you hear the words of Moses being read from the seat of Moses, to do what Moses instructs you, But anything after that is my opinion. It is my, doctrines of men, my Talmudic understanding, just fill in the blank, right? My religious affiliations, my biases, and I'm trying the best I can to get at the truth. And all I can do sometimes is tell you, hey, this is what I think is going on. But at the end of the day, every one of us have to figure this out for ourselves. Continuing, and you shall guard my matzah and fashion them. I am Yahuwah the ever living, and you shall not profane my Kudash name, but I will be regarded as Kudash in the midst of the sons of Yasharel. I am Yahuwah, consecrating you, that caused you to go forth from Aratz Mitzrayim to exist for you of Allahayim. I am Yahuwah the ever living. Chapter 23, and Yahuwah the ever living set forth words in order toward Al-Mashahad to declare. Set forth words in order toward the sons of Yasharel. Take a mental note of that. Now, the commandments here is regarding the festivals. And notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say set forth words in order towards the sons of Aaron. He doesn't say set forth words in order toward the tribe of Judah, to the Jews. No, to the sons of Israel. So every single one of you, assuming that you identify as the house of Israel, that's what I identify as. These words are, well, I would say all of these words are directed at us, whether we're a son of Aaron or not, but these are definitely directed at us. And speak towards them, the sons of Israel, the house of Yasharel, the appointed times of Yahuwah the ever living, which you shall call out unto them a kudash, calling together. Recitation and reading, these are my appointed times. 6 days you shall fashion prescribed work of service, but on the seventh day is a Shabbath of Shabbathun, a kudash, calling together, recitation, reading. You shall not fashion any prescribed work of service. It is a Sabbath unto Yahuwah the ever living in all your places of habitation. I love there how it tells you actually what to do. It tells you what not to do, no prescribed work, but it tells you get together if that is possible for you to do that with others. Maybe you can do it online. Of course, that's something we're doing right now, coming together, if only online, recitation and reading, which is what we're doing. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah the ever living, my kudash, calling together, which you shall call out unto them in their set times. In the first kadash, on the 14th of the kadash, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Instead of chadash or hadash, I'm going to say a hard K here. In the first kadash, on the 14th of the kadash, for those of you who are linguistic experts, feel free to correct me on that. Between Arabeam and the Pesach unto Yahuwah, on the 15th day of the same Hadash, if the Hag of Ha Matauth, let's see what this says right here. This is the feast of unfermented bread. That's where we get matzah from right there. Ha Matzauth. Unto Yahuwah, 7 days you shall eat unfermented bread. On the first day he shall exist to you a kudash ha-kira'ah. You shall fashion in him no mala'akath. A lot of words here tonight, Pamela. This word mala'akaha is particularly applies to work of an artisan or to any work which contributes to the wealth of property of anyone. The three-lettered child root here is mala'ak, which is a word for messenger or king. The two-letter parent root is lak, meaning to go or to walk. And for those of you who do pick up a copy of this Torah, man, she has so many footnotes in here. I think there's like thousands in here, if I'm not mistaken. 7 days you shall eat unfermented bread. Okay, yeah, I read that. Okay, and you shall bring them near a fire offering unto Yahuwah the ever living 7 days. Upon the seventh day is a kudash ma-kira'ah. You shall not fashion any business or prescribed work of service. I think some of you still, for those of you who are the sun, moon, and zodiac calendar crowd, a lot of you are some of you are still keeping it this month in May. You haven't gone through Passover yet. I think the rest of us have pretty much finished up the Passover season this year. And Yahuwah, the ever-living, set words in order toward Al-Mashahad to declare, set forth words in order toward the sons of Yashruel and declared toward them, if you come toward Ha'arat, which I will give unto you, and reap her harvest, then you shall bring them near and Amar of the first fruits towards the priest, and shall wave the Amar to the face of Yahuwah the ever-living, for your acceptance from the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave him. And you shall fashion on the day of your waving the Amar, and a lamb, perfect whole sound, a son of a year, for an ascending offering unto Yahuwah the ever-living. And his gift offering shall be 2/10 parts of fine flour or meal, with oil poured over, a fire offering unto Yahuwah, for a sweet aroma. And the drink offering shall be a fourth of a hin. And you shall not eat lachem or roasted grain or fresh corn until that bone of the day when you bring near the gift offering into your Alahaya. These are the statutes for a time of long duration until the circuit of your generations in all your places of habitation. And you shall inscribe upon your shafar for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day you brought the waving of the wave offering. She will exist 7 Sabbaths complete until the day following the 7th Sabbath. And we're getting into Pentecost here. You shall inscribe upon the shafar 50 days. Then you shall bring near a Kadash gift offering unto Yahuwah the ever-living. From your place of habitation, you shall bring 2 lachem of waving of 2/10 part of fine flour or meal. They will exist baked with I guess that's a kamatz. They are the first fruits unto Yahuwah the ever-living. And this is speaking of fermentation right here. So they shall bring near a fermentation gift offering unto Yahuwah the ever-living. From your places of habitation, you shall bring 2 lachem of waving of 2/10 part of fine flour or meal. They will exist baked with hamatz. They are the first fruits unto Yahuwah the ever-living. With the lachem, you will bring them near 7 lambs, perfect, whole, sound, sons of a year, and 1 young bullock, son of the herd, and 2 rams. He will exist as his ascending offering unto Yahuwah the ever-living. And he shall fashion them 1 hairy goat for a sin offering, and 2 lambs, sons of a year, for a shalom offering. And the priest shall wave over the lachem of the first fruits for a wave offering to the face of Yahuwah with the 2 lambs. He will exist kudash unto Yahuwah for the priest. And you shall call out to them on the bone of this day. He will exist to you a makurah kudash, which that's a big word there, but that is for a set apart calling out or convocation. So you could say he will exist to you a set apart calling out or a convocation. You shall not fashion any work of service. This shall be statutes for a time of long duration in all your places of habitation unto the circuit of your generations. And in your reaping, the harvest of your land, you shall not completely finish the corners of your field when you reap. And you shall not gather the gleanings. You shall leave them for the wretched poor, afflicted, and for the stranger. I am Yahuwah your Alahaya, which we covered that, of course, last week, and I showed you an example in the book of Ruth. Wouldn't that just be amazing? I think I said this last week. Wouldn't that be amazing if that really were the case I'll speak for America, right? Where there's just like fruit trees everywhere, and you could, it's not an entitlement issue. But you could just never have to worry about going hungry. You could just walk across America and just eat fruit the whole way there, eat crops, and they're just there for everyone. And Yahuwah the ever-living set words in order toward Al-Mashahad to declare, set words in order toward strong leaders of the sons of Yashruel to declare, in the 7th Kadash, on the first of the Kadash, he shall exist to you a Sabbath or a Shabbathu-un, a remembrance of Thira Aha. You're killing me, Smalls. A Makara Kudash. And so this here, among her many footnotes, is pronounced Terura In modern Israel Hebrew, this is Yom Teruah. The word carries the meaning of a joyful sound, a warlike cry, the sounding of a trumpet. This is where, of course, we get the Feast of Trumpets. Not the New Year, but it is the Jewish New Year today, currently. And you shall not fashion any prescribed work of service on the bone of that day, for it is a day of Kafarayam, to make a covering atonement over you into the face of Yahuwah. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the whole verse there. That you're to afflict yourself, your soul, your nafashath, and bring near a fire offering unto Yahuwah the ever-living. And you shall not fashion any prescribed work of service on the bone of that day. This is the 15th day of the month. For it is a day of Kafarayam, to make a covering atonement over you unto the face of Yahuwah your Allahaya. For the nefash that does not enuha on the bone of that day shall be cut off from his people. And any nefash which fashions any mala'akaha in this, the bone of the day, then I shall destroy that nefash from the midst of his people. This shall be statutes throughout the circuit of your generations in all your places of habitation. It shall be to you a Sabbath, Shabbat, Thu'un, a great Sabbath observance, and you shall afflict your nefash, or your nafashath, your souls, on the 9th of the Kadash, on Arab, from Arab until Arab shall be Sabbath, Shabbathu'un. Of course, the Day of Atonement is, considered by Judaism to be the holiest day of the year. And I've pointed out many times on here, this is where all sin is forgiven on this day. If there's any question about it, that the sins of all the people, both conscious and unconscious sins, can be forgiven on this day. We can be cleansed. And of course, this was the what our high priest Yahshua has done for us. Then, of course, we then get to the Feast of Tabernacles, which rounds or ends the last of the 7 feasts on the menorah. And Yahuwah the ever-living set words in order toward Al-Mashahad to declare. Set forth words toward the sons of Yashruel to declare on the 15th day of the 7th Hadash, this shall be a Kag of Ha-Saku'uth for 7 days. And did I say the 15th? I'm so sorry. That was a mistake. The 10th day. Forgive me. The 10th day of the month is the Day of Atonement. I don't know what I was thinking. All the glories of being live. You give non-factual information sometimes. Forgive me. On the first day shall be a set-apart calling out. You shall not fashion any prescribed work of service. 7 days you shall bring near a fire offering unto Yahuwah the ever-living. And on the 8th day shall exist a set-apart calling out or convocation, a Makura Kudash unto you, which we just saw right there. A set-apart calling out or convocation. And you shall bring near a fire offering unto Yahuwah. It is an assembly of the people. You shall not fashion any mala'akaha abadaha therein. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah the ever-living, which you shall call out them as a set-apart calling out to bring near a fire offering unto Yahuwah the ever-living, and a sinning offering and a gift offering, a sacrifice and a drink offering is the Debar proposed plan of a day upon his day. Separate from the Sabbaths of Yahuwah, and separate from your gift offerings, and separate from all your vowed sacrifices, and separate from all your spontaneous willing offerings which you give unto Yahuwah the ever-living. All right, let me just say this, because I know that there are a lot of people that follow this channel who are investigating the Torah. Maybe you're not on it yet. Maybe you're new to it. And what I just read can be incredibly anthropological, and in that sense it can be scary, because you're hearing, like, if you don't do these things, you're going to be cut off from the people, and you need to have all these sacrifices and bring fire and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so here's the thing. I was telling my group this earlier tonight, that if we are doing it correctly, I like to think of it as that we are, of course, the protagonists of the story, but we are our own antagonist, meaning that you are going into these feasts, searching out your very soul. When it says to afflict your soul on the Day of Atonement, I don't think it's just like it's not just a checking off the box. Like, okay, I went without eating today, whatever. I didn't shower or something like that. But this idea of afflicting our very soul, I think it's calling on us to repent. It's seeking within ourselves and saying, how am I my own worst enemy? How can I change these habits in my life? How can I better conform to who the righteousness of my heavenly Father? And that's essentially what we want to be doing through these feasts. You're not going to get it right your first year. I guarantee it. Like, you're not. And even if you think you do, you're probably going to change your theological opinions on things over the years as you dig into the Torah more. So don't be afraid of slipping up. Don't let that stop you. Don't let that handicap you. Go into this freely for a love of our Heavenly Father and wanting to serve Him, and keeping these just feasts the best you can. The Feast of Gathering In. Certainly on the 15th day of the 7th Kadash, when you have gathered in the produce of Aratz, the earth, you shall observe a feast unto Yahweh for 7 days. On the 1st, a Sabbath observance, and on the 8th, a Sabbath observance. So speaking about, of course, Sukkot here, this is the Thanksgiving of the Bible. You bring in your produce, your harvest, and it's a time of merriment and joy. And you shall take for yourselves the fruit of adorning trees, hand-shaped branches of palm trees, and boughs of thick foliage trees, and willows of the streams. And you shall be joyful to the face of Yahuwah Allah Yakam for 7 days. This is a command that you be joyful. So you better be joyful. So if you want to know if you're doing Sukkot right or wrong, there's an indicator right there. If you're miserable through the whole thing, you probably need to check yourself. And you shall observe him a festival unto Yahweh for 7 days in the year as statutes to time of long duration throughout the circuit of your generations. You shall observe him in the 7th month. You shall settle down to dwell in Sakath for 7 days, a temporary dwelling. All natives of Yasharel shall settle down to dwell in Sakath, for the purpose and intent that the circuit of your generations may acquire knowledge. For I made the sons of Yasharel to settle down to dwell in booths upon my causing them to go forth from Aratz Mitzrayim. I am Yahweh your Allahayah. And Meshachah set forth words in order concerning the appointed times of Yahweh the ever-living toward the sons of Yasharel. Quick commentary on this, because I won't be talking about this later tonight. I actually want to kind of do a bit of a rewrite, or I guess an addition to my paper, The Pilgrim's Path, where I talk about the great pilgrimage of the Middle Ages was, I believe, a fulfillment of Sukkot. It's interesting that in Sukkot, traditionally, what many of the Jews will read is the Ecclesiastes, which some people will interpret that as a very nihilistic book in a lot of ways. Like nothing really matters. There's, everything is vanity, all this kind of stuff. But it's in Sukkot that we recognize that this is like what Peter talked about, that he talked about his body as a tent, as temporary, and that, he was going to give it up. When we live in these tents, when we separate ourselves from our normal physical abode, we recognize that life is fleeting, that we come and go, and we are forced to reckon with the material world, our own passions and loves for it, and recognize that we're not going to be here for long. And what's really important, our pursuit of our Heavenly Father above. So, and of course, interestingly enough, I want to kind of connect that with Ecclesiastes in the Middle Ages itself. And of course, wisdom literature was very, very popular at that time. Commandments regarding the lamps and the bread. This will be our last chapter tonight. And Yahweh, the ever-living, set words in order toward Al-Mashahah to declare, command the sons of Yasharel, and they shall bring toward you pure olive oil, beaten oil for the light, for lamps to burn perpetually. Now, this is really interesting because, once again, this command is for all of Yasharel that we bring forward pure olive oil, beaten oil for the light, for lamps to burn perpetually. Where does this sound familiar? Well, there's the wise and foolish virgins. Some of them had oil for the lamps and some of them didn't. So we can spiritualize this, even though I cannot bring pure olive oil to the tabernacle in Israel. That system is gone. This still applies to every one of our lives, that we have to bring him that oil. So let's think about that. From outside of the veil of the revealed precepts in the tent of meeting, Aaron shall put him in order from Arab until Bakur, which is daybreak or dawn, from dusk till dawn, to the face of Yahweh, the ever-living, perpetually, a statute unto time of long duration for the circuit of your generations. Upon the pure manuraha, so this is the menorah, he shall arrange and order the lamps to the face of Yahweh, the ever-living, perpetually. And you shall take fine flour or meal, and shall bake her 12 halauth, 2/10 deals shall exist in one kala, and you shall set them in place, arranged in 2 rows, 6 in a row, upon the pure table to the face of Yahweh, the ever-living, and shall gift upon each row pure frankincense, that she may exist on the bread for a memorial offering, a fire offering unto Yahweh, a statute for time of long duration. On the Sabbath day, he will set in array to the face of Yahweh, the ever-living, perpetually, from the sons of Yasharel a Bereath to time of long duration, and she shall exist to Aaron and to his sons, and they shall eat him in the set apart place, for he is the most set apart to him from the fire offerings of Yahweh, a perpetual statute. And the sons of Yashar, Alayath, woman, went forth, and he was the son of an Egyptian man, a Matzareah man. So a Yasharel woman who was with formerly an Egyptian man. This is the son, and I will get to commentary on this tonight. It'll be at the very end. In the midst of the sons of Yasharel, and the sons of the Yasharel woman, or the Yashar Eliath woman, and a man of Yasharel strove together. And the son of the woman cursed Hasham and lightly esteemed him, and they brought him toward Aaron. His mother's name was Shalamayath, the daughter of Dabareah of the tribe of Dan. And he caused him to rest in custody under guard, that the mouth of Yahweh might declare distinctly unto them. And Yahweh, the ever-living, set words in order toward Al-Mashah to declare, bring forth him who has cursed toward the outside of the encampment, and all the ones who heard and responded shall support their hands upon his head, and all the congregation shall cast stones at him. I think that this had to be such a awful scene. I'm trying to imagine if I had to participate in a kind of a stoning ceremony. I mean, hopefully I'm not the recipient of it, right? But to actually have to be commanded to pick up a stone and throw it at this guy. I'm telling you right now that this would put the fear of God in people. I mean, people can do, like nowadays with our criminal system, there's so many people that don't function outside of prison. They function better in prison. So when they're out of prison, they just act in a very corrupt way, doing what they please, being like, okay, well, if I get caught, I'll just, the government's going to feed me and take care of me and that kind of stuff. But man, like, what if we went back to, like public hangings, like you steal a horse, and you meet the end of a rope. Today, that would be, say, a car, right? Now we have things in the Torah that we can go by, but if we were to implant the fear of God in people again, like, you commit these heinous crimes, you're going to be judged for it in this way, man, that would shape up society real quick. And towards the sons of Yasharel, you set forth words to declare, if a man lightly esteems cursing his Alahiah, then he shall carry his penalty of sin. This guy was clearly in contempt. He was contemptuous towards Yahweh. And he who curses the name Yahuwah, dying, he shall die. Stoning, he shall pile stones upon him. Like the stranger, like the native born, upon cursing the name, he shall be executed. And if a man smites any nephash of Adam, dying, he shall die. And he that smites the nephash of a beast, he shall offer a covenant of shalom, a nephash in exchange for nephash. And if a man gives a blemish upon his fellow, like that which he has fashioned, in like manner shall be done unto him. A breaking in the place of breaking, an eye in the place of an eye, a tooth in the place of a tooth. Like that which he has given a blemish in Adam, in like manner shall be given unto him. And smiting a beast, he shall in a covenant of shalom recompense. And he that smites Adam, he shall be slain. One mashapat or judgment, one judgment shall exist to them. Like the stranger, like the native born, he will exist. For I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. And Meshach set words in order toward the sons of Yasharel, and they carried forth him who cursed toward the outside of the encampment. And they did overwhelm him with stones. And the sons of Yasharel fashioned like that which Yahuwah, the ever-living, established unto Meshach. And I think that concludes the reading of the Torah tonight. Let me just double check to make sure that is the end. Yes, it is. All right. Now, I want to point this out that I'm about to give you an imperfect example. It is an example, but it doesn't quite line up with scripture. So, we do read that Levites are to remain pure and not touch dead bodies. I'm assuming in this instance that non-Levites or whatever are going to go bury those people. Honestly, I have not read the Talmudic interpretations of how they perceive that. Nevertheless, there is a context here that it is understood that families bury their own dead. Loved ones bury their own dead, which is why the Levites were explicitly told, by the way, I don't want you to become unclean, tarnished through this if you're bringing offerings and sacrifices to me. I mean, maybe they could, and just they were unclean for a certain amount of time after that. It's like, okay, well, you can't perform your duties until you're clean again. Nevertheless, as I pointed out many times in the past, that I am of the opinion that everyone who was there for the burying of Yahshua was his family. They were somehow related to him. And of course, you see there the ones with the hands around his neck and face. That is our very own Mary Magdalene, who has a special place of honor here at the Unexpected Cosmology. Isn't that interesting that, she's kind of right up there with his face. And of course, she's always busy. She's always doing something. Like Mary Magdalene rarely is just standing around idle in these illustrations. Whenever they show John at the foot of the cross, he's kind of just standing there twitching his thumbs, looking off to the side in a lot of these paintings. I don't really know what to do with John there at the foot of the cross, if he was actually there. But with Mary Magdalene, she's always doing something. I got to see this actual painting. You're getting a terrible low quality image here. Maybe that's purposeful on my part. I don't really know. I got to see this in the Musée de Cluny in Paris. It's an all medieval museum, only medieval stuff in there. It is like the kingdom of heaven for me. I mean, I'm in my own version of paradise, like a kid in a candy store. Like if you're going to inherit Willy Wonka's factory, that's what I wanted to inherit. Musée de Cluny. I got to see this up front. I could stare at this for hours. And well, she's doing something really interesting now. I'll let you kind of figure out what she's doing. All right. I don't need to go over these passages. I've gone over them so many times. Look at these good-looking gentlemen with beards. I mean, these are some good-looking beards. I'm not here to ridicule these beards. I mean, I could only dream of having a beard this nice. I don't know if you guys remember last year, I grew out a good-sized beard, and finally I'm like, I went ahead and I trimmed it. But you see of different various shapes. I think my absolute favorite is this guy over here on the left. I mean, that is a killer beard. So jealous. Amazing. Well, of course, one of the ideas that is put forward is that you're not to shave your beard. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's what it's saying. It could be, and it's certainly the Talmud would agree with that. And I don't say that to belittle the belief. You guys know that my view on the Talmud has changed considerably. I see it as a bunch of guys getting together and trying to figure out theology, just like in denominations or other things like that. And there's going to be some gems in there. There's going to be things I agree with and things I don't agree with. That's okay. So what's going on here? Well, I've given you. Oh, this is interesting. This is from the Torah, a woman's commentary. And I've been reading this a lot recently. I don't know if I'm allowed to or not. I'm a man. I'm not a woman, but it's actually really good, just very basic kind of Talmudic commentary for Jewish women. So the Torah women's commentary, it's actually brand new. I think it's only like 20 years old or something like that. This is what it says regarding this passage. And they say, also see Deuteronomy chapter 14. We'll get there eventually. They shall not shave, smooth, or make gashes in their flesh. And the commentary on it is this: the law does not prohibit priests from all displays of mourning. So this is kind of interesting. So they're taking this in the context of mourning for perhaps the dead. And we saw this, with like how the Levites are to interact with the dead, their family, or not. However, this verse outlaws these particular mourning rites, perhaps because they were associated with Canaanite funerary practices. Isn't that interesting? So they were going to go into Canaan and they were going to see men who would shave their beards for different purposes, which we don't totally know. Look at the Nazirite vow, right? You can shave your head. You can do that kind of stuff. So there are certain reasons why you would. I showed you last week this right here, the corner of a beard, possible interpretation, a marring of the corners of the beard. In fact, I would say that's a very good interpretation. According right here, it says they shall not cut incisions in their flesh. So this would be a part of that, some worship of a deity or a dead person, something like that, which he doesn't want us doing. I covered I'm not going to go into the eunuch passages again, but I did insinuate this right here. And this really got to me, Acts 15. So let me just read this. This is the Jerusalem Council, and this is, it's going forward the circumcision debates and, how they're to execute the Torah to these Gentiles. And James is going to come up with the brother of Yahshua is going to come up with the decision here. Then the whole assembly kept still as they listened to Barnabas, and Shaul, or Paul, tell what signs and miracles God had done through them among the Gentiles. Yaakov, this would be James, broke the silence to reply, "Brothers," he said, "hear what I have to say. Simon, or Simon Peter, Kepha, has told in detail what God did when he first began to show his concern for taking from among the Goyim a people to bear his name. And the words of the prophets are in complete harmony with this, for it is written, 'After this, I will return and I will rebuild the fallen tents of David. I will rebuild its ruins. I will restore it so that the rest of mankind may seek Yahuwah. That is, all the Goyim who have been called by my name, says Adonai,'" or this could be, I guess, rendered, says Yahuwah, "who is doing these things. All this has been known for ages. Therefore, my opinion is kind of interesting here how this is the Jewish Bible, and I'm not cross-referencing other versions like the NIV or KJV, but he says here, my opinion. That's kind of interesting. Therefore, my opinion is that we should not put obstacles in the way of the Goyim who are turning to God. Instead, we should write them a letter telling them to abstain from things polluted by idols, from fornication, from what is strangled and from blood. These are the very things that we have been reading over the last 2 or 3 weeks in Leviticus. For from the earliest times, Moshe has had in every city those who proclaim him, with his words being read in the synagogue every Sabbath. That's what we're doing week by week here. This is the synagogue where we are reading the words of Moses week by week. And the hope is that as we hear them year after year after year, it transforms us, right? But the first thing that this has been well commented upon by Torah people, by dispensationalists, by everybody, that his top concern was that these Gentiles, that they're entering a covenant, a marriage relationship with the bridegroom, with Yahshua, and that they keep away from all the other gods. That is the temple prostitutes, that is the idols in the marketplace, all these things, the stuff strangled with blood, the fornication. I mean, all this is related to somehow the worship of these other gods. And so I personally think that this really sums up what is happening in the Torah as they're going into Canaan. And he's telling them, look, you're in a covenant relationship with me. I don't want you to doing any of this other stuff. And of course, the idea as well for those that are going into Canaan, they too would be hearing the Torah recited to them, and they would be growing and learning and conforming into the image of our Heavenly Father week after week. So here's some of the other ideas here of body mutilation. So I'm going to bring this up because if somebody is, in some ways, I'm kind of okay with some of the Talmudic stuff, and let me explain this. Yahuwah, he's giving this example. I don't want you marring the side of your face. I don't want you taking like a knife or a razor and just cutting into this and marring this part of your body for the purpose of worshiping these other gods. He doesn't say anything about, to my understanding, unless if I'm reading it wrong, I see nothing about stretching the earlobes down. So I guess it's okay to stretch our earlobes, right? Let's just dismember every other part of our body because he doesn't say it. So what my whole thing on this is that he could have put in 100,000 laws in there if he needed to. And this is one of the interesting things about the Torah is that he keeps tacking them on, like they commit certain sins. And then he's like, okay, well, I guess I got to explain this a little bit more. And he's giving these instances. Well, in the instance that this happens, don't do this, but there's a root cause to it. All right. So it's kind of like if someone has a headache, and you give them the Advil and you're like, oh, I cured your condition. No, you didn't. You just took away the headache, but it could be actually something in their foot that is causing the headache, right? So it's the same thing here. There's a root condition to all these laws he's putting out. And he's like, look, if you just love God and love your neighbor, you're good to go. But I'm going to give you these instances where if you do this, you are, infringing upon this. So my whole point here is that just because he didn't say, don't stretch your ears or extend your neck, doesn't mean that we should, right? So the Aztecs would stretch their ears to connect with their gods and spirits more easily. So I would assume that if the Israelites were going into Aztec territory, he would tell them, hey, don't stretch your ears down. And we would be asking the question, why is he so against their stretching their ears today? And here's, of course, stretching our necks. So neck rings were often seen as symbols of divinity or high rank, while also offering protective powers. So this would be, I would assume, there's nowhere in the Torah it says don't stretch your neck. So is it okay to stretch your neck and do this? No, I'd say no, right? Because it's the same. If we can find the root cause of why he's telling us not to mar our face, this would apply. And of course, we have this here, which very well may be talked about. This is something that the Canaanites very likely were doing, was stretching their skulls. And it was probably a practice in Egypt as well. And of course, all over the world, we see this happening. So we know that this is connecting probably to the gods. I showed you this last week with Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Not the best film in the entry. Not the best entry in the series, obviously, but nevertheless, I think that the messaging in there is very profound, even if it wasn't, executed as the best. And they go and find this skull. And the interesting thing about it is that I think there were actually 12 of them in the room or something like that. And they actually found that all these entities were remaining behind until the skull was actually retrieved. And when it was put on there, it became flesh. And of course, it took out the villain. And what I loved about the ending of this was that, the saucer didn't go into space, but it was interdimensional. Of course, that's pretty on par with ufology at this point in history, that they live among us. So the physicality, they were leaving behind this physicality, but only for an intended purpose until they could disappear again. All right, so let's talk more about some of these spiritual versus physical laws. A donkey and an ox. So we see that in Deuteronomy 22:10, do not plow with an ox and a donkey yoked together. Now, this is one of the things we were discussing this week. And I'll ask all of you this question. Who in their right mind, what kind of farmer in their right mind would plow a field with a donkey and an ox put together? Now, in today's environment, maybe it's a little bit more common, but I would think that most farmers would figure this out on their own. Maybe they would try this one or two times and go, this isn't really working out for me. Maybe I could plow the field better with just the ox or just the donkey. That, these two creatures of different strength and, energy, it's just a mismatch, and it's actually causing more problems than good. So my point is, if no really again, I'm not a farmer, okay? I'm speaking out of ignorance here. So for those of you out there who are farmers, go like, yeah, actually my neighbors do this. Forgive me. I just don't think that this would be a common practice. So it seems like why is this even a thing? Why is this even a command in the Torah? It's kind of like, here's one for you. Don't jump off a bridge and commit suicide, right? Like kind of a given, right? It doesn't even need to be a command. It just don't go kill yourself. You can go through all the hundreds and hundreds of ways that don't kill yourself, right? And so this is kind of I think what I've been coming into a deeper understanding of as I go through these Torah portions year after year after year. And I have stated improperly in the past that, of the 613 commands, that not all of them are intended for us. I don't know if I agree with that anymore. I think that they're all intended for us. Every single one of them somehow, because even we are called to be priests, right? So even if I'm not a Levite priest, I'm still called to be a priest in the kingdom. And so Paul does an amazing job of he's telling the Gentiles, okay, I'm going to take this Hebrew document, this Torah, this law from heaven, and I'm going to tell you how this affects your life, how we actually take this and apply it to our day to day. And here's this is brilliant. This is his commentary on Deuteronomy 22:10 right here. Do not yoke yourselves together in a team with unbelievers. And it even says right here, this is the Jewish Bible. It says in a team, right? For how can righteousness and lawlessness be partners? I mean, already you can see what he's talking about here. The donkey, I guess, is the mocker, the fool. Don't be in the company of fools. It's that simple, guys. Don't treat Yahweh anyone who's going to be contemptuous towards him or whatever. Just keep away from those people. Don't let those people into your lives. Don't let them in your influence, your circle of influence. What fellowship does light have with darkness? What harmony can there be between the Messiah and Belial? What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement can there be between the temple of God and idols? I love how he's basically taking this and trying to apply this to, he's showing how this one law applies to all these different areas of life. For we are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will house myself in them and I will walk among you. I will be their God and they will be my people. Therefore, Yahweh says, go out from their midst, separate yourselves. Don't even touch what is unclean, Then I myself will receive you. In fact, I will be your father, and you will be my sons and daughters, says Adonai Sevaot. Those are the words of Paul right there. Amazing how he's just quoting through the Old Testament and giving this very insightful spiritual commentary on Deuteronomy, 2 Corinthians chapter 6. Of course, here we have another example on light and darkness being unequally yoked together. So you could take Deuteronomy 22:10, don't plow with an ox and donkey yoked together. And think of the idea of plowing, right? I could go, well, I'm not a farmer. This doesn't apply. I can yoke as long as it's not in a field, as long as I'm not plowing, I could yoke a ox and donkey together. See, you see what I can do there with the letter of the law? Again, I'm totally missing the point. It doesn't matter if I'm a farmer or not. Deuteronomy 22:10 applies to Genesis chapter 6. And I'm not going to read to you from Genesis 6. I'm going to read from the book of the Cave of Treasures. This is what it says. Jubal and Tubal-Cain, the two brethren, the sons of Lamech, the blind man who killed Cain, invented and made all kinds of instruments of music. Jubal made reed instruments and harps and flutes and whistles, and the devils went and dwelt inside them. When men blew into the pipes, the devils sang inside them and sent out sounds from inside them. Tubal-Cain made cymbals and sistra and tabourines or drums, and lasciviousness and sorry for mispronouncing that. It's getting late. I'm just going to do that and not apologize. And fornication increased among the children of Cain, and they had nothing to occupy them except fornication. Now they had no obligation to pay tribute, and they had neither prince nor governor. And eating and drinking and lavishness and drunkenness and dancing and singing to the instruments of music, and the wanton sportings of the devils, and the laughter which affordeth pleasure to the devils, and the sounds of the furious lust of men neighing after women. I guess that's their way of catcalling, but they were neighing after women, almost like animals. But that, catcalling too is an animalistic term. And Satan, finding his opportunity in this work of error, rejoiced greatly, because thereby he could compel the sons of Seth to come down from that holy mountain. There they had been made to occupy the place of that army of angels that fell with Satan. There they were beloved by God. There they were held in honor by the angels and were called sons of God, even as the blessed David saith in the psalm, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you sons of the Most High. Now, I purposely read a passage here that is not going with the Watchers theory of the Book of Enoch. This is going with the sons of God is the sons of Seth theory. And I purposely read from this because it is a perfect example of a donkey and an ox being yoked together, a believer with a non-believer, that they went down and they, the light was forever extinguished from those who did it. Meanwhile, fornication reigned among the daughters of Cain, and without shame, several women would run after one man, and one man would attack another, and they committed fornication in the presence of each other shamelessly. For all the devils were gathered together in that camp of Cain, and unclean spirits entered into the women and took possession of them. The old women were, isn't this interesting too, that these so-called righteous men, these sons of God coming down off the mountain, who were there to take the place and serve as the angels who had fallen, that they're attracted to these demon-possessed women. Just ugh. The old women were more lascivious than the maidens. Fathers and sons defiled themselves with their mothers and sisters. And again, this is where I go back to the culture, the Canaanite culture that they were going into, the Israelites, that it was, I think, a repeat of this kind of pre-Diluvian culture. Sons respected not even their own fathers, and fathers made no distinction between their sons and other men. That's disgusting. And Satan had been made ruler or prince of that camp. And when the men and women were stirred up to the one word I can't pronounce, and I'm not even going to try. To frenzy by the devilish playing of the reeds which emitted musical sounds, and by the harps which the men played through the operation of the power of the devils, and by the sounds of the tambourines and of the sistra which were beaten and rattled through the agency of evil spirits. The sounds of their laughter were heard in the air above them and ascended to that holy mountain. And I suggest to you too that again, the materialization of these spirits were probably done through all these sexual acts. And when the children of Seth heard the noise and uproar and shouts of laughter in the camp of the children of Cain, about 100 of them who were mighty men of war gathered together and set their faces to go down to the camp of the children of Cain. When Yered heard their words and knew their intention, he became sorely afflicted, and he sent and called them to him and said unto them, by the holy blood of Abel, I will have you swear that not one of you shall go down from this holy mountain. Remember ye the oaths which our fathers Seth and Enosh and Canaan and Malalel made you swear. And Enoch also said unto them, hearken, O ye children of Seth, no man who shall transgress the commandment of Yered and break the oaths of our fathers and go down from this mountain shall never again ascend it. But the children of Seth would neither hearken to the commandment of Yered, nor to the words of Enoch, and they dared to transgress the commandment. And those 100 men who were mighty men of war went down to the camp of Cain. And when they saw that the daughters of Cain were beautiful in form, and that they were naked and unashamed, the children of Seth became inflamed with the fire of lust. And when the daughters of Cain saw the goodliness of the children of Seth, they gripped them like ravening beasts and defiled their bodies. And the children of Seth slew their souls by fornication with the daughters of Cain. Isn't that interesting? They slew their own souls. And when the children of Seth wished to go up again to that holy mountain after they had come down and fallen, the stones of that holy mountain became fire in their sight. And having defiled their souls with the fire of fornication, God did not permit them to ascend to that holy place. And moreover, very many others made bold and went down after them, and they too fell. The book of the Cave of Treasure. So there is one way right there, in very simple terms, just going back to what Paul said based on the commentary of Deuteronomy 22:10, what fellowship does light have with darkness, and so on and so forth. How can a believer have in common with an unbeliever, and so on and so forth. So just remember that how we live our lives is important. So let's talk about more spiritual laws in the Torah, mixing seed. So this is something else we were talking about this last week. You shall guard my statutes. You shall not allow your cattle to lie down with diverse kinds. Your field you shall not sow with diverse kinds. And a garment of diverse kinds, such as linen and wool together, shall not ascend upon you. I should have highlighted that last part too. So here's the thing about this. So I know that this is another kind of anthropological element that people kind of, but linen and wool, am I living in sin? Is my wardrobe in sin? Well, here's the thing. Like, my understanding of this, again, I could be totally wrong, is he's saying here in the warp and the woof of your, when you make clothing, like don't sew linen and wool together. Well, who would do such a thing? Like who would do such a thing? Like, I don't think most clothing I guess clothing today is, there is mixed fabrics and that kind of stuff. And we want pure stuff, but linen and wool together, like that's not traditionally going to be done. And I personally think what Yah is doing here is he's taking these, because Yahshua would do the same way. Yahshua talked in the exact same manner where he would give these extreme examples to really make us think about something. So let me go back to this idea of your field you shall not sow with diverse kinds. And for those of you who love to take this for Nephilim research, I'm not trying to stop you. Go ahead. You might be totally right. We talk about this as like, there's some sort of genetic engineering and splicing together. And apparently they were doing that back then. Maybe they were. Here's what I think is going on. So in the Talmud, I was looking at commentary on this. I actually might have some commentary on this. I might have something to talk about. Let's see. Maybe I do. Let me look here. Skipping through all this. I might get there later. I'm not really sure. in the Talmud, they'll talk about how in order to not sow in your field, like you have to have one kind of crop in your field. And in order to ensure that the fields are separated, you need so much space, you need a fence, a wall or something like this. They're trying to, figure out, what does he mean by this? Well, one of the problems with this is it occurred to me because I used to be a wine server years ago. I worked for a winery out in California, and they would give us, as a wine server, we would have all the wines they would bring in. They would always change, and they would give us a menu that we would memorize, like all the different tastes in there, that we would, sound really smart to the customers, like we knew what we were talking about. And I remember, for example, the winemaker would say, well, this year there was the farmer across the road was growing oranges, and so all of our wines kind of taste like oranges. It has that citrusy taste to it. And we would taste and go, oh yeah, kind of on the back end, we could taste the citrus. And that's the idea of the cross-pollination. You can't stop that from happening. That's impossible to stop. So here's what I think is going on. I think he's giving just a ridiculous example here. He's like, imagine if you were to go into keep in mind too, we have the Canaanite magical practices going on too. There was probably a lot of that, but imagine if you were to go into a field and you took like wheat seeds and corn seeds and potatoes and oranges and strawberries, maybe several different types of berries and grapes. You just fill in watermelons, whatever you want to grow, and whatever the seeds look like. But let's just say, they're just a bunch of little tiny seeds, and like even mustard seeds and so on and so forth, and maybe an oak tree or whatever. And you reach into your bag, you pull them in your hands, you just go like this. And you just start throwing them everywhere, and they just go everywhere all over the field. How in the world are you supposed to harvest that? You can't harvest that. Like any farmer who tried that once would go, this is idiotic. This is impractical. It doesn't make sense from a business model. It's like, it makes sense that you section off, you have your blueberries over here and your strawberries over there and your raspberries over there. And they, different times of the year, and your peach trees. And so whatever your crop is, right? You kind of have them aside in different areas. You wouldn't do that. And so how do we relate this to our spiritual lives? And Joshua does an amazing job of explaining this to us in two ways. When he talks about the seeds, keep in mind, he is commenting on the Torah. I don't think he's inventing anything new here, but he's telling us in a way that we can finally, like, how do I, as a non-farmer, apply this to my life? Because all the Torah applies to me. So that same day, Joshua went out of the house and sat down by the lake. But such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the crowd stood on the shore. And he told them many things in parables. And this is one of them. He said, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he sowed, some seeds fell alongside the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seeds fell on rocky patches where there was not much soil. It sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun had risen, the young plants were scorched, and since their roots were not deep, they dried up. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. But others fell into rich soil and produced grain, 100 or 60 or 30 times as much as had been sown. Those who have ears, let them hear. In the same chapter, he gives a second analogy of seeds. Now, this one is, we talk about this a lot for different personalities, spiritually speaking, who come into the faith and maybe fall away. And, very few of them are that final harvest. But I showed you this last week. Here's the illustration right here, of course, of, he plants, the farmer plants a field, the enemy comes in. I love this illustration, by the way. It was so awesome. I just love his like lizard feet, and he's got a cape that's like a lizard cape, but it's not like a real on his body, but the wings come out of the cape. It's pretty funny. And he plants the tares, and this is what he's talking about here. So like seeds of diverse kind, this is explained in Matthew 13. Why would anybody in their right minds plant wheat and tares together? You would not want weeds in there, corrupting the whole thing. And as we know that the workers of the angels, essentially, they're like, let's go and just rip up this whole thing and start over again. He's like, no, 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 no. We're going to see this through. Yes, it's more work for all of us, but that's the enemy for us, right? He's sowing discord. He's coming in and he's creating confusion and lies, and he's making this harder for us. So that's what we need to make sure we cleanse out of our lives. In terms of seeds of mixed kinds. All right. So that's Noel Joshua Hadley's Talmudic explanation for you tonight, boys and girls. You are free to come up with your own possible explanation for the spiritualization of the Torah. This is, of course, Tamar and the priest's daughter and Judah. So this is an example in Scripture of a priest's daughter who would be burned. Now, this was specifically speaking of the Levites, but it goes beyond that, because we see that Tamar was the daughter of Shem, and he was a Melchizedek. Right there, you could see this is the Aramaic Targum calling him a Malka Zadika, who was Shem Bar Noah, the king of Yerushalayim. And this is, of course, Jewish tradition. So you can see over here, this is the travels of Noah into Europe, which is the Christian Latinized tradition, also calling Shem a Melchizedek. So at least you get both sides in agreement there on this issue. And then again in the Aramaic Targum, this is in Genesis 39. It says that she was the daughter of Shem the Great, whose her name was Tamar. And of course, we see the penalty for what happens. It says, Judah says, Yehuda said, is she not the daughter of a priest? Let her be brought forth and burned. And of course, the Bath coal, the dove from the Holy Spirit comes down from heaven and, saves her from it, and says that she was the matchmaker and she did all this kind of thing, and that it was all in this divine plan. And of course, she was spared from the fire, and Judah knew his sin from that point forward. But nevertheless, so you see that enacted there, that is not just directed to the Levites. And I will point out Exodus 19 for those of us who say, well, again, I'm not a Levite priest, this doesn't affect me. But we know that he's calling out to all of Yasharel here, and unto me you shall be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you are to speak to Yasharel. We all need to see ourselves as priests. You must not defile your daughter by making her a prostitute, or the land will be prostituted and filled with depravity. That comes from Leviticus 19. Okay. Why am I showing you a picture of a cheeseburger? It looks amazing, doesn't it? I mean, I look at that and I just I want to go eat a cheeseburger right now. And not just, it's got onions. I don't even know what that good sauce is at the bottom, but that egg, that just does it. And I don't think there's bacon on this, but if there was, I would just make believe in my mind that it was beef bacon, because for those of you who came to my house a couple weeks ago and spent the week with me, man, we made burgers for a few days and we put some beef bacon on there, which just amazing. But I'm telling you, the egg is what does it. I learned this when we were living in France several years ago, our first trip, and man, put eggs on pizza. Oh my goodness. And so I'm telling you guys really quickly, let's say you cook pizza for 20 minutes or something like that. You wait for the last several minutes, maybe the last 10 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever. You open up the oven really quickly, crack an egg, put it on there, or how many eggs you want. So it doesn't cook too much, but when you pull that out and you put that roller over it, and then you break the yolk and it just runs out. It's just so amazing. If it doesn't get all over the place, it doesn't belong in your face. And then, of course, we have this adorable picture of a goat and a kid, the mother and baby. This is brought to you by Photo Library. So I think this is available to purchase if you want to frame this on your wall. Of course, since I did not purchase it, it still has the stamp on there. So when texts collide, mother and offspring. We read this in Deuteronomy 14:21. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Now, I know this wasn't our Torah portion tonight, but I am bringing this up for a specific reason because we are talking about animal cruelty. Now, in the Aramaic Targum, it says it adds definition to this, and it says, "It shall not be lawful for you to boil, much less to eat flesh with milk when both are mixed together." So it changes it from a young goat, a kid in its mother's milk, to flesh with dairy products. You cannot put them together. And this, I will remind you, came after many years of rabbis getting together and knocking heads together. Exodus 34:26 in the Aramaic Targum says the same thing. You're not allowed to boil or to eat flesh and milk mixed together, lest my displeasure be kindled against you. Now, I love the Aramaic Targums. They are not perfect, and they do include rabbinical commentary on there, which I find to be very helpful and insightful to understand Judaism. And here's like my whole thing with the Talmud. I came out of the Protestant tradition where you just villainize the Talmud. Never mind the fact that Protestantism is its own Talmud full of human tradition. And I'm okay. I'm going to show you an example later tonight if I have time. I'm running out of time. Where even Joshua affirms human tradition, human religious tradition. This is going to shock some people, but he does. I kind of see the Talmud for what it is. I think is that, it's hundreds of years of Jewish guys getting together and trying to figure things out, and they aren't always in agreement. They'll even tell you that in the Talmud. And eventually they get to a point where one side wins over, and, all of a sudden you can't eat cheeseburgers anymore. And the same thing happened in the Latin tradition and the Orthodox, the Catholic, the, Church of England, you name it, right? They just build these doctrines, eventually take over and win. Some of them are correct, some of them are incorrect, and they are kind of what they are. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to be found in there. Well, this is what the Talmud says in Mishnah 8:4. It is prohibited to cook the meat of a kosher animal and the milk of any kosher animal. I don't think I need to read the whole thing because it's pretty straightforward. They just kind of keep explaining it over and over again. Well, here's what I think the proper context is. Keep in mind, it has nothing to do with the cheeseburger. The humane treatment of animals. This is what we read tonight in Leviticus. And Yahweh, the ever-living, set words in order to Al-Mashahad to declare, an ox or perhaps a lamb or perhaps a goat, if he is brought forth, then it shall exist 7 days beneath its mother. And from the 8th and further, he shall be graciously accepted for a gift offering by fire unto Yahweh, the ever-living. And ultimately, the case I want to make for the rest of my time tonight is that how we treat animals, and especially animals that cannot defend themselves, is going to say a lot about us as humans and how we treat other humans who perhaps are weak and cannot defend for themselves. And this just comes down to chivalry. This is like, I see chivalry all throughout the Torah, and this is one of them. And what he wants, this is where I could say he could come up with, instead of just saying, don't cook a kid in its mother's milk, he chose that for whatever reason. And it probably has something to do with the Canaanite culture, their ritualistic magical practices. But he could have come up with 1,000 other examples. Okay, if you're off in the woods and you're hunting or whatever, just treat the deer in this way or whatever. Like don't treat the animals that you're taking their lives for their meat, for their, for the skin or whatever you're going to do with it. Treat them with respect, because all of these animals, they derive from the Father of spirits. They all come from the same source. How you respect nature, how you respect animals says a lot about who you are as a person. So we see several examples of the humane treatment of animals in the Torah. In fact, this is one of those things that you can attribute, I would say, the Torah itself to much of how the West started changing its views about animal protection. And this is specifically targeted as the reason for that happening, the good transformation in Western society. So we see that on the Shabbat rest in Deuteronomy 5, that animals like humans must rest on the seventh day. So it has been suggested, I think it's in the book of Jubilees, they have commentary on this about how I think it says in there, like, not to even go fishing. And somebody would be like, well, that's not work. I'm just relaxing. Well, you're giving the fish a rest, right? From being killed on that day. The muzzled ox in Deuteronomy 25, it is forbidden to muzzle an animal while it is working in the field or threshing, ensuring it can eat while it works. The mother bird. When taking eggs or chicks, one must send away the mother bird to spare her emotional distress. That's Deuteronomy 22, 6-7. Isn't that interesting? And I think that probably has something to do with the emotional distress of the mother, why you leave the baby with it for, give it 8 days. Give it the first week for it to be with its baby, and then you kind of wean it off and you take it away from the mother. And if you leave it there with the mother long enough, eventually the farmers I've spoken to, the mom's like, okay, I'm done. Can you please take this animal from me? I need some space. But you give it a week and you show some respect and, allow the animal, you understand that the animal has real emotions and, real feelings and thoughts. The prohibition of mixed plowing, we saw that in Deuteronomy 22:10, and ox and donkey cannot be yoked together, as this causes suffering due to their different strengths. So this comes from Proverbs 12:9. A person wins praise in keeping with his common sense, but a person with a warped mind is treated with contempt. Better to be despised and have a servant than to boast of one's status but have nothing to eat. A righteous man takes care of his animal, but the wicked, even his compassion is cruel. So there you see right there that, and it's not just your animal, it's your neighbor's animal and God's animals. You take care of them. And so this is one of the, I know that I've always been for nature preservation. I think nature preservation is good. We are called to be caretakers. And this is something that the liberals, they champion this. Conservatives do not. Unfortunately, the liberals have they give it a facelift of kind of an atheism kind of approach, much more of a humanistic. It's unfortunate that, the conservatives don't take this cause up, but it says that the wicked are, how you treat an animal kind of speaks about who you are as a person. Here's what C.S. Lewis says. Now, C.S. Lewis was really big on this idea of chivalry, and that the chivalrous person, a truly chivalrous person, which is, I think, all of our calling as men, women are called to be ladies, men to be chivalrous, is to take care of the weak. Not ensure that the weak continue to be weak by any means, but those who are weaker than us, we recognize that. And this is what one of the many things he had to say about the cruelty to animals. I think God wants us to love him more, not to love creatures, even animals, less. We love everything in one way too much at the expense of our love for him, but in another way, we love everything too little. No person, animal, flower, or even pebble has ever been loved too much, more than every one of God's works deserves. And this really goes into Tolkien's whole theology too, the whole idea of a hobbit, and they'll just spend their life devoted to a garden. And this just amazes, outsiders, how they could just devote their life to just soil and flowers. By the way, that's another issue, gardens. If it is true that, you have to have your seeds in different fields, you can't have gardens, guys. Think about that. I mean, what are all the fruits and vegetables that go in the garden? They're all mixed together. So I really, really think that we need to kind of reconsider what the Talmud is, this Talmudic idea is telling us. Here's a passage from the book of Britain. This comes from chapter 3. Joshua saw a man ill-treating a horse, and he rebuked him for his cruelty to a dumb animal. And the man became angry and said, "This is my beast." And Joshua said, "You are wrong. It is God's creature, and I, as his servant, am here to protect it. For no man can wholly own any living creature except to be the name of the great Elohim, or God of life. There's actually a passage in here too where he actually goes and sleeps with the animals in the barn at night and take care of them. I wish I would have put that in here. He, according to this, he was really, really deeply interested in the health of animals. Here's a illustration by John Tennille that I have shown many times from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there. And the night is very esoteric. What's interesting about this is that the knight himself, seated on the horse, represents his higher spiritual heavenly self come down to the earth. It's the meeting of the baser animal self with the high, like we are aspiring to be that knight on the horse. This is chivalry. The horse is our fleshly bodies here on earth. And this is one of the ways that, well, I'll show you in a second. The next thing I want to show you is the logo of the Knights Templar. And they will famously show two people seated on a horse. This is, of course, to show the spiritual brotherhood, that our true heavenly self, that we are to ascend our physical limitations and have a brotherhood as we are seated in this mortal body. Of course, taking care of the poor and the weak and that kind of stuff. So since I started out tonight talking about Greece, I'll give you a little bit of a preview here of what you're in for. And the interesting enough, the hot rod, and I'm bringing up the hot rod because we're talking about horses, right? The knight on his horse. In modern kind of 1950s cinema, the hot rod itself takes on the horse. The hot rod represents our human body here on earth. And it's interesting that when Kaniki pulls up to the rally, they're over there in the outer darkness. You can see the camp, kind of the camp of the saints in the background. They're around the fire. That represents not the camp of the saints, but it represents society. They are outside of society. They are not the norm. And he pulls up and there's just beat up kind of this hot rod. I think it's a Ford. At first, John Travolta, Danny, he just mocks it. But of course, the mockery amongst the guys in here, it's actually a protective shield. It's actually a bonding. It gives them limitations as to their emotions, but it's a bonding ritual to mock each other. But as he pulls up to it, Kaniki's like, "Hey, I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna soup up the engine, and we're gonna race this thing on Thunder Road." And there's this great scene where really quickly, John Travolta, he looks down at it. You could see him beaming up as he's imagining the possibilities, because the hot rod itself represents the metamorphosis of the soul. They're going to transform. They're going to be transformed through this experience. Of course, with the five senses, right? The 5 gears and all that. In the next scene, of course, is when he meets Sandy for the first time since their summer nights, their summer loving. And he doesn't give her the same appreciation. It's interesting that he sees this transformative car with more respect. And of course, that'll come into the commentary, but we quickly see the, what were their names? I forgot. The Scorpions, the rival gang pulls up, and they're in they're already their transformed hot rod. They have already, the idea of a hot rod is that this isn't just a factory bought kind of, post World War II, as they were developing the suburbs, the whole suburban sprawl. Like they rebelled and they built this with their own hands. They became a piece of this car. And what we see here, this is what I was talking about earlier, that when we see these antagonists in these films, if we see the antagonist just as the bad guy, we completely miss the point of these antagonists. The antagonists are there for us to search out, to defeat our own weaknesses. It's not about defeating them. It's about defeating the weaknesses within our own soul. This is what I was telling you about, like the Day of Atonement, right? We need to see ourselves as our own antagonists. How can we defeat this antagonist and, stop sinning, stop having the leaven during an unleavened bread week, all that kind of stuff. Yahshua has forgiven us, but how can we stop, sinning? Go and sin no more. How can we be more righteous? We are our own worst enemy. And so that's the whole idea about the two competing cruisers. It's really a competition. And in time, these scorpions will actually expose their Achilles heel, and they will show their own weaknesses, like at the dance and so on and so forth. This is another quote from the Book of Britain, chapter 9. And this old chapter is written as policy for knights, for the knighthood, for anyone who's a knight of the realm. And he says here, I speak to knights who surely of all men are the most noble. Eat slowly and with good manners. I tell my children this all the time. Even if alone at the table, do not gulp down ale or water, for food hastily eaten sits on an uncomfortable stomach. Though we must feed our bodies, even as animals have to, we are not as they, and must do so with good manners. This is also a knightly discipline which will enhance the light of your soul. And again, this is why knights, like on chess or whatever, are treated as the horse itself. This is our baser animal self that we are to overcome and become like our, higher self. I'm just throwing this in. I love this painting of this Knight Templar. He and his horse are both weary. He's old. He's been, I don't know if he's been out on the Grail quest. I don't know if he's returning home from the crusade. I don't know what's happening, but I just love that painting. Sometimes I feel like that. This is how I feel pulling up on a Friday night, before Sabbath. I feel like, especially this week, I feel like this guy right now. This right here was has to be one of the most esoteric illuminations I've ever seen. This is the Codex Manessa, I believe it's called. There's a lot of beautiful illustrations in here, but this says it all right here. Okay, I'm scrolling up and down. So start at the bottom here. You see that this knight, keep in mind that the horse itself represents typically the fleshly body here on earth. But look at how it's trampling on the water, and down in the water are these demons, and they're fighting each other. Now, typically demons are depicted fighting each other up in the firmament just below heaven, almost like below the waters of heaven. Get it? So it's the same thing here. Anytime you see anything under the surface of the water, this is referring to our subconscious, telling us that this knight's own enemies is his subconscious. He has to, the Holy Grail, the true quest for the Grail, right, is to know thyself, to get to know thyself better. You have to conquer these, whether it's trapped emotions or whatever. You need to find out what these are, and you need to defeat them. But of course, as you probably know, a narcissist will never get there. A narcissist gets trapped staring at his own reflection. He will never go beyond the mirror. A true, a righteous person who can defeat narcissism and get to a subconscious self has no reflection, because you're going beyond your reflection. You're going through the looking glass. You're going below the surface of the water. Well, what's interesting too about this knight is that over him we see wisdom. She's got a flame. She's got an arrow to pierce the heart. That's just a big, very popular idea of the pierced heart in medieval literature and culture. And some of these friars or nuns, whoever, would talk about like a literal piercing of the heart. They're very, very painful. And this is the highest form, like the 7th level. Like when you go through the different layers of the inner castle, you get to the very top and you experience Yah personally piercing your heart. So there that's, you can see that's the Queen of Heaven right there. That's wisdom herself, the flame of illumination, and she's riding on top of the night. She's coming down from heaven. It's just beautiful. I love this. Love this. I want to frame this on my wall. I love this illustration. All right. We're coming up towards the end, but I don't know how many more segments I'm going to have. Are you a Judaizer? That's what I'm calling it. This man right here, he's calling you a Judaizer. We've all been there. We've all been probably accused of this. Anyone who has ever heard you talking about the Torah and that you actually would abide by anything found in there, you must be a Judaizer. Silly Gentile, the feasts are for Israel and not the Jews. No, I already gave this away earlier tonight, but we see this right here in chapter 23. Set forth words in order towards the sons of Judah. Nope, doesn't say that. Set forth words in order toward the sons of Aaron. Doesn't say that. Set forth words in order towards the sons of Yashrael, Israel. And this, of course, is regarding the the festivals, the 7 feasts. So I'm not going to go through all those again. But I want to show just a few passages for anyone who has made it this far. Maybe you're just now, for whatever miraculous reason, by the timing, perfect timing of Yah, you're tuning into this. Show that New Testament, that the believers are being written to are attributed as Israel. So, I mean, if you feel that the letters of Paul or Peter or Jude or James or any of those apply to you, they can only really apply to you if you're Israel. The idea that you're being grafted into Israel. This is what it says in Ephesians chapter 2. Therefore, remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision made in the flesh by hands, that at that time you were without Messiah, being aliens from the commonwealth of Yasharel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without Elohim in the world. But now in Messiah, Yahshua, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Messiah. So brought into the commonwealth of Israel. Galatians 6:16 says, and as many as walk according to this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Yasharel of Elohim. Luke 2:32 says, a light to bring revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people, Yasharel, Israel. Of course, this is not speaking about Judah, right? This is Messiah, that he would be a light. He would bring the Gentiles into the commonwealth of Israel. Romans 9 says, again, going back to Paul, for I could wish that myself were accursed from Messiah for my brother and my kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Yashreelites, Israelites, to whom pertains the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the Torah and the service of Elohim and the promises, whose are the fathers, and of whom are concerning the flesh Messiah came, who is over all, Elohim blessed forever. Amen. Here's from James, Yaakov 1:1, and we can see who he's addressing. Yaakov, a bondservant of Elohim and of Yahuwah, Yahshua, Messiah, HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings. So apparently, if you're not a Jew and you're not, I mean, Jews would be one of the 12 tribes, obviously, but if you're not a Jew and you're not Israel, then apparently this is not written to you. James 1:1. First Peter says, Kepha, an apostle of Yahshua Messiah, to the pilgrims of the diaspora in Pontus, Galatia, and so on and so forth, other places like that. So talking about the diaspora, this is, of course, the diaspora of Israel. I'm not going to go into a whole study on that, but Revelation 3:9. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. People love to quote that. But then it says, indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet and to know that I have loved you. Well, the context here, the contrast is Esau. And who was Esau's brother? It was the one he loved, Israel. So people love to point out the synagogue of Satan without commenting on the fact of who they are supposed to be. It's not the Gentiles. It's Israel. Well, let's see. I could talk about the Sabbath, but I think we're kind of running up on time here, and you could see that's a lot of notes. Oh, yeah, this is what I wanted to finish here. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the parable of the 10 virgins, a Jewish insight. This is an article that was written in 2023 by Jerry DeMello Jr. And something for you to think about. And I would be curious to hear your convictions on this, your conclusions. I mean, let's follow this through to its logical conclusion. All right. The Yom Kippur overlay, the parable of the 10 virgins, is centered around 10 virgins awaiting a long delayed bridegroom who would arrive and open the doors to a wedding feast. It was important to be prepared for his arrival, for once he entered, the doors would be locked. To fully understand the parable, we must step away from our Christian belief of the second coming of our Messiah. The audience would instead have associated this parable with the feast of Yom Kippur. To that end, Let's rewind our clocks to that feast at the time of Christ. 2 goats were presented to the high priest as a sacrifice, both without blemish, one for God and the other for Azazel. We went over this a couple of weeks ago. Both would die, but the goat for Azazel first bore the sins of the community. At the time of Christ, a tradition specified, now keep in mind, this is a human tradition. Okay, we could call this a doctrine of men. So if this guy is correct, the logical conclusion I'm taking this to is that, I hear within the Torah crowd, it's like Torah, Torah, Torah. Like it's, like you're adding to the Torah, you're doing this. I just believe in the Torah. And it's like, actually, if we were actually to go into their house and interview them, their day-to-day life, I think that they don't just live according to the Torah, if you know what I mean. There's other things. Well, the point here is that Yahshua himself, if this is correct, is taking a human tradition that's not found in the Torah per se. Yes, Yom Kippur is, but the traditions around it, and he's making he's legitimizing it by making a spiritual parable, one of the most popular in the history of the church. So at the time of Christ, a tradition specified the goat for Azazel be delivered to a Gentile who would then take it outside the city gates and throw it off a cliff. When the goat had died, the sins of the community were forgiven. Now, keep in mind that in the Torah, my understanding is that the goat just kind of wanders off into the wilderness. Now it could be picked off by lions and bears and other things like that. But, it was a wandering spirit, a restless spirit, just like Satan himself. But according to this, a Gentile, a non-Jew would take the goats and throw it off a cliff. I don't remember that. Do you guys remember that in Leviticus? I don't remember that. When the goat had died, the sins of the community were forgiven, and a scarlet thread affixed to the temple area turned white. The now white thread, having affirmed the atonement, cued the high priest to re-enter the Holy of Holies for a prayer of thanksgiving. The high priest is bridegroom. Afterwards, the high priest shed his robes for a final water purification ritual. Once purified, he donned bridegroom vestments along with a crown and went into the streets for a wedding celebration. The wedding feast of Yom Kippur was symbolic of the mystical wedding bond between God and the Jewish people. The bridal imagery of the people as the bride and the high priest as the bridegroom exiting the Holy of Holies is still kept alive in Jewish, Kabbalistic, and Hasidic traditions. The Kabbalists are still keeping this alive. Unmarried women would line the streets dressed in white as virgins awaiting their bridegroom. Not only were their sins atoned, but God would be understood as renewing his marital relationship with Israel. The virgins did not know exactly when the high priest would make his appearance because the community had no specific foreknowledge as to when exactly the goat for Azazel would die for their sins. So they waited, and sometimes waited a long time into the night. This goat is taking a very long time to, I guess, capture and throw off a cliff when whatever else happens. So that's it right there. So, maybe this is something I need to fact check a little bit to see if this is legitimate. But I find that really fascinating that Yahshua is taking a contemporary event and giving it an insanely amazing spiritual context that has been replayed through the years. So, though of course it has obviously eschatological end times, right? The idea that, Azazel being thrown off a cliff, well, where was he put? He was put into abyss, right? And that lines up with the kingdom, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of eschatological stuff there, regardless. Okay, I think that's a good place to end this tonight. As you can see, I have more material, but can't cover it all every single week. I just appreciate this community and guys, come by on Friday nights. I just love talking with you guys. This is my church, my congregation. And obviously I'm not able to participate really in the chat because I'm up here talking, but yeah. Thank you guys for doing this week after week. And I hope that this can be a blessing in your in your lives. And yeah. And I want to keep doing this for many, many more years. For those of you who did tune in late, we're getting this this Paleo Hebrew scriptures off, I think, to a really good, I think it has wings, and I think we're flying at this point. And I hope, my prayer is that Pam and Rebecca do get financed for the next decade while they finish this up. It's almost like that scene in Lord of the Rings where Sam and Frodo, they in a way they kind of leave the fellowship, and they go off to drop the ring in Mount Doom, and that's what they're doing. And I don't know if I'll be with them the whole time. I would love to be. I'd love to come alongside them. But yeah, just pray for them as they do this incredible task, you guys. And I just, for those of you like maybe confused on this, like what we read tonight, okay, that wasn't just taking the KJV and sliding in paleo words. Okay, that's not what is happening. This isn't like, I'm not knocking the Sefer. The Sefer is amazing. I have it on my wall. This isn't the Sefer though. All right. This is literally a translation through the Paleo. This has not been done in thousands of years, at least nothing documented in official history. And so, I'm excited for the future, and I hope you guys are too, that, you guys want to be a part of this. So thank you for your prayers for them, your prayers for me. I need your prayers. My family needs your prayers. We need your support. And I'm going to get that grease paper to you guys real soon. So hope you guys have a good Sabbath rest. Good night, everybody.